Selected parts from the book One Life is Not Enough, written by Shri K. Natwar Singh. Part 7. My posting to Peking was announced soon after as third secretary in the embassy. My diplomatic career had begun. I will speak about my time in China in greater detail in the next chapter. On my return to India from Peking in May 1958, I had expected to be attached to the China division, but that, to my disappointment, was not to be. I was appointed Under Secretary in the Indian Foreign Service branch. The department was an administrative oddity, and only those who did not have godfathers were dumped there. I could easily have asked Krishna Masi, that is, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru's sister, to do some log rolling on my behalf, but chose not to ask for such a favor. My immediate boss was the ferociously acerbic but competent and clear headed Leela Mani Naidu, the daughter of the irrepressible Sarojini Naidu. She initially treated me with sneering disdain, but her behavior changed dramatically once she learned that I knew Krishna Huti Singh. Leela Mani Naidu's ill temper and chaotic functioning were legendary. No one had the temerity to contradict her, as she had direct access to the Prime Minister. The only officer who did stand up to her was Muhammad Yunus, who had been in jail with Nehru. Tony Agate was also one of my senior officers. One day, I sent him a file sanctioning the leave application of the section officer. Tony sent the file back with LBW written on it. I went to him and asked what a cricketing term was doing on a leave application. He asked how a dope like me got into the IFS. LBW meant let the bloody fellow wait. In the interim, I had become a member of the Gymkhana Club and occupied suite number 22 in the residential area of the club. It was an ideal place to live, swimming in the morning, tennis in the afternoon, billiards in the evening. The library was a significant attraction, and it was during this period that I not only had plenty of time to read but also to review books, something that M.O. Mathai, the all powerful private secretary to the Prime Minister, tried to warn me off. One day at the Gymkhana, M.F. Hussain turned up and asked if he could borrow my newly bought Fiat car for a few hours. I readily agreed. The few hours turned into 48 hours. During this time, I was more worried about my car than Hussain, who I knew didn't have a license. When he finally returned, I asked him what happened. I just felt like going to Kanpur, he said. It was sometime in late November that I was visiting Mrs. Huti Singh at Tirmurti House. S. Mulgaonkar, the editor of the Hindustan Times and a friend of Krishna Masi, was also present. Indira Gandhi joined us, followed shortly after by M.O. Mathai. I was talking about the book Mulgaonkar had asked me to review. Mathai told me sternly that as an officer of the IFS, I could not write for newspapers. Book reviewing is not the same thing as writing for newspapers, I retorted. Mathai was not satisfied. Have you taken permission from the government to review books? He asked. At this point, Krishna Masi intervened. Look here, Mac, Natwar is like my son. Lay off. And he did. He was a man with a chip on his shoulder and quite often misused his power. S. Gopal, in his biography of Nehru, writes Mathai exercised vast and irregular power. Nehru was informed that Mathai could not account for his great wealth and, without doubt, had received money from CIA as well as businessmen in India. It can indeed be safely assumed that from 1946 to 1959, the CIA had access to every paper passing through Nehru's secretariat. In early May 1960, I became private secretary to the Secretary General SG, Shri R.K. Nehru. I was not overworked. I continued reviewing books and writing articles. I regularly played tennis and even got elected to the Delhi Gymkhana Executive Committee. However, I was in danger of getting an inflated idea of my importance. So I mended my ways. Treading on sensitive toes was not a risk worth taking. Innovation and originality were frowned upon, and mediocrity was a virtue. And this was more than evident in the caliber of the ICS officers. The four top secretaries, R.K. Nehru, M.J. Desai, B.N. Chakravarti, and Y.D. Gundevia were all ICS men. In his autobiography, Jawaharlal Nehru was severely critical of the ICS, which was disdainfully called neither Indian nor civil nor service. Independent India catapulted them to high positions that would have eluded them under the Raj. With the exception of Sabimal Dutt, almost all lacked gravitas and none of them stood up to the Prime Minister. Y.D. Gundavia, the only Parsi in the service, did once in a while quitch the boss in a somewhat irreverent way and got away with it. The most outstanding member of the ICS was Sir Girija Shankar Bajpayee. He had been appointed Secretary General of the Ministry of External Affairs in 1948. The Prime Minister had high regard for his judgment and experience. In mid-June, R.K. Nehru took over as Secretary General of the Ministry of External Affairs, succeeding Sir N.R. Pillai, a well-meaning Brown Sahib. A private secretary's job combines discretion with responsibility, and R.K. Nehru had complete confidence in me. However, he was in several ways a difficult person, and having served under him in China, I was familiar with his work habits. He agonized over seemingly insignificant things. When he was required to send a note to the Prime Minister, a dozen drafts would land in the waste paper basket, and he was unduly fastidious about his appearance. The Secretary General's office was 15 yards from that of the Prime Minister's, and every once in a while, Nehru would walk into the Secretary General's room. Once or twice, he had peeped into my cluttered room shared by my two stenographers. I unintentionally invited the Prime Minister's wrath in the first week of July 1960. The Secretary General was to leave for Mongolia to participate in their National Day celebrations. The evening before his departure, I cleared all the files except one. In it was the Prime Minister's letter to the King of Nepal, a 4-page epistle. I put it in my cupboard thinking I would read the letter next morning and then send it to the Foreign Secretary. The next morning, I accompanied the Secretary General, that is Sri R.K. Nehru, to Palam Airport. He was to catch a flight to Hong Kong, and as it was delayed, I stayed chatting with the ebullient Mrs. Rajan Nehru, the Secretary General's wife. A few minutes later, I saw a vaguely familiar man approaching our table. He uttered 5 chilling words. Panditji is calling you, sir. My heart skipped a beat, and I immediately remembered the Nepal file. I drove to South Block at breakneck speed, at the entrance of which I was met by a person who, too, politely reminded me, Panditji is waiting for you, sir. I ran up the stairs 2 steps at a time to my room, pulled out the file from the locked cupboard, and rushed to the Prime Minister's Personal Secretary, S.P. Khanna. On seeing me, he said, Nator Singh ji, the Prime Minister will throw something at you if you go in. He was very angry. Give the file to the Foreign Secretary. On reaching Foreign Secretary M.J. Desai's room, I was once again told of the Prime Minister's ire and was instructed to leave the file there. A day later, Badar Tayabji, the Secretary Administration, told me what had transpired. While I was merrily chatting at the Palam Lounge, dramatic events had been unfolding in South Block. At 9:30 a.m., the Prime Minister arrived in his South Block office. Instead of sending for the Foreign Secretary, he went to the room. MJ, what do you think of my letter to the King of Nepal? MJ said that he had not seen it. Sir, the Nepal file has not so far been put up to me. This is a classical bureaucratic talk. The Prime Minister was slightly put out and asked Khanna, his private secretary, why the file hadn't reached the Foreign Office. Khanna told him that the file was sent to Secretary General. At this, Nehru was livid. Why was it sent to the Secretary General? He has nothing to do with it. Khanna informed him that all files coming from the Prime Minister were sent to the Secretary General, whose private secretary, that is I, passed it on to the foreign secretary and others. Khanna, normally an unflappable individual, then rushed to my room but found me gone. My steno told him that I had gone to the airport. Khanna asked him where the file was and then demanded that my cupboard be opened. He was informed that it was locked and I had the key. By now, the foreign secretary and the other secretaries had assembled in the Prime Minister's room for their morning meeting. Khanna then informed the Prime Minister that the key was with Natar Singh, who had gone to see the SG off at the Palam. The Prime Minister had a minor explosion. Brake opened the cupboard and asked the police to get hold of him, and he banged the table. To relieve the tension, Tyabji said, "Sir, Natwar must have found your letter to the king very interesting and kept it to read at leisure." By now, the Prime Minister was in no mood for jokes. "I have not written the letter for Natar Singh's pleasure. Get hold of him. I can't have my work disrupted in this fashion." Petrified at the prospect of coming face to face with the Prime Minister, I changed my exit route from my room after this incident and resumed the old route only a week later. As I was passing by his room one day, Prime Minister Nehru stepped out as well. I greeted him with folded hands, with a book between my palms. He stopped, returned my greeting, and asked me what the book was. I said it was Amari D. Recounts The Soul of China. "I have read his The Soul of India," the Prime Minister announced. "So have I, sir." He took a few steps towards the staircase and remarked, "Rather Splendarian," I thought. I have never read Oswald Spengler. All I could do was to smile nervously. He walked on, and as he started to descend the staircase, he looked back and said with a beautiful smile and a twinkle in his eyes, R.K. Nehru's Imperator. It was rare for a young IFS officer to have breakfast with the Prime Minister, but I was afforded that privilege twice during Krishna Masi's trips to Delhi. On the first occasion, he was avuncular but absorbed in his thoughts. The only time he showed some interest was when I said a word or two about my stay in China. On the second occasion, when Krishna Menon, Indira Gandhi, and Firoz Gandhi were also present, he looked grim. In awe or nervousness, I don't remember which, I kept refusing everything I was offered. "Ye sharma sharmi kyun? Why so shy?" he asked me abruptly and put an apple on my plate. At the end of the breakfast, Indira Gandhi told me, "Papa is very upset. One of his pet dogs is very ill." In 1961, Queen Elizabeth II was the chief guest at the Republic Day parade. Lord Mountbatten had got Nehru to agree to the Queen and President Rajendra Prasad jointly taking the salute. This was an atrocious proposal. I spoke to several of my colleagues about it. There was unanimous disapproval. I also spoke to S. Gopal, the son of Dr. S. Radhakrishnan. Sensing the mood, Nehru dropped the idea. What bothered me even more was the pernicious influence of the Mountbattens on Nehru, so much so that he was literally eating out of their hands. He was oblivious to Mountbatten's glaring shortcomings. When Edwina Mountbatten died in early 1960 in Borneo, Nehru paid her a tribute in Parliament. This was unprecedented. Thanks for listening. My immediate boss was the ferociously acerbic but competent and clear-headed Leela Mani Naidu, the daughter of the irrepressible Sarojini Naidu. Acerbic, Acerbic. Acerbic means sore, sharp and bitter. Irrepressible, Irrepressible. Irrepressible means uncontrollable. No one had the temerity to contradict her, as she had direct access to the Prime Minister. Temerity, Temerity. Temerity means audacity, excessive confidence or boldness. Mr. Mathai was not satisfied. Have you taken permission from the government to review books? He asked. At this point, Krishna Masi intervened. Look here, Mac, Natwar is like my son. Lay off. And he did. He was a man with a chip on his shoulder and quite often misused his power. To have a chip on your shoulder means to seem angry all the time. However, I was in danger of getting an inflated idea of my importance. So I mended my ways. Treading on sensitive toes was not a risk worth taking. Treading on sensitive toes means to do something that upsets or offends someone. Independent India catapulted them to high positions that would have eluded them under the Raj. With the exception of Sabimal Dutt, almost all lacked gravitas. 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 Gravitas means dignity, seriousness. The Secretary General's office was 15 yards from that of the Prime Minister's, and every once in a while Nehru would walk into the Secretary General's room. Once or twice he had peeped into my cluttered room. Cluttered. Cluttered means untidy. The evening before his departure, I cleared all the files except one. In it was the Prime Minister's letter to the King of Nepal, a 4-page epistle. Epistle means a communication. The next morning, I accompanied the Secretary General to Palam Airport. He was to catch a flight to Hong Kong, and as it was delayed, I stayed chatting with the ebullient Mrs. Rajan Nehru, the Secretary General's wife. Ebullient. Ebullient means cheerful and full of energy. Khanna, normally an unflappable individual, then rushed to my room but found me gone. Unflappable. Unflappable. Unflappable means cool, calm, unexcited. Petrified at the prospect of coming face to face with the Prime Minister, I changed my exit. Petrify. Petrify. Petrify means extremely frightened. He walked on, and as he started to descend the staircase, he looked back and said with a beautiful smile and a twinkle in his eyes, R.K. Nehru's Imperator. 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 Imperator means a commander. In 1961, Queen Elizabeth II was the chief guest at the Republic Day parade. Lord Mountbatten had got Nehru to agree to the Queen and President Rajendra Prasad jointly taking the salute. This was an atrocious proposal. Atrocious. Atrocious means a wicked and vicious. What bothered me even more was the pernicious influence of the Mountbattens on Nehru. Pernicious. Pernicious. Pernicious means having a harmful effect, especially in a gradual or subtle way. Nehru was oblivious to Mountbatten's glaring shortcomings. He was eating out of their hands. Eating out of one's hands means to be completely controlled by someone. Thank you very much.